Last weekend, a friend invited me over to show off his new simple life. He'd become obsessed with sourdough, the ultimate poor man's bread, historically made with nothing but flour, water, and desperation. He talked about getting back to the earth and rejecting consumerism, while he carefully dusted a $75 handcrafted basket with organic heritage flour that cost more per pound than a prime ribeye. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Here was a man standing in front of a $3,000 professional-grade fermentation setup, holding a bread-scoring knife made of rare Japanese steel, explaining how humbling it was to make his own food. When I asked when we could eat, he admitted he hadn't actually produced a successful loaf yet. He was still waiting for his starter sommelier to analyze his yeast's flavor profile. It's a bizarre phenomenon that's taking over almost every corner of our lives. Things that were once the literal definition of scraping by have been hijacked and rebranded as luxury experiences. Whether it's records that used to rot in thrift store bins, the van life that used to mean you were one step away from the street, or even the hobby of keeping a few chickens in the backyard, the wealthy have found a way to make being basic incredibly expensive. What's fascinating isn't just the price tag, it's the shift in perception. We've reached a point where people are paying $10,000 for a bicycle just to arrive at a coffee shop 30 seconds faster, or spending $1 million on a copy of Super Mario 64 that used to sit in a bargain bin at the local flea market. It's no longer about the utility or the joy of the activity itself, it's about the performance of it. From your morning coffee to the games you played as a kid, the rich have officially entered the chat, and they've brought their checkbooks to a game we used to play for free. I have to be honest with you, walking away from his kitchen, I felt like I was losing my mind. I mean, a starter sommelier, is that even a real job?
Oh, I'm afraid it is.
Or was he just messing with me? Because we are talking about yeast and bacteria. It's fungus. It's not a vintage Bordeaux from 1982.
It sounds like a skit from a comedy show, but I can assure you the starter sommelier is the logical conclusion of where we are as a society. It isn't satire. It is the new economy.
Wow.
And I think that feeling you had, that specific type of discomfort or annoyance, watching him stand in front of a $3,000 machine that makes something people used to make in caves, that is the core tension we need to explore today.
It felt like theater. That's the only way I can describe it. Like he was performing the role of a rustic baker. But the set design cost more than my car.
That is the perfect way to frame it. It is performance. But we need to be careful not to dismiss it as just inflation. This isn't just things cost more now.
Right, because that's what I thought at first. Just, everything's more expensive.
If it were just inflation, the flour would cost a bit more, maybe. But the method would be the same. This is something else. This is a fundamental sociological and technological shift in how we relate to skills, to memory, and to the tools we use.
Okay.
So our mission for this deep dive is to investigate why this is happening. Why are we taking things that were historically free or cheap, like wild yeast, old vinyl records, or sleeping in a tent and turning them into high-barrier luxury goods?
That's the part that gets me. I understand why a Ferrari is expensive. It's a complex machine, a lot of engineering. But bread is the definition of basic. So is it just consumerism run amok?
That's a huge part of it.
Is it just rich people running out of things to buy, so they're buying our hobbies now?
That is certainly part of it, but the research suggests something deeper is happening, something in our culture, in our brains even. To answer this, we have pulled together a massive stack of sources. We aren't just looking at prices.
Right.
We have histories of milling technology that go back thousands of years to the Roman Empire. We have sociological studies on the concept of de-skilling. We have technical breakdowns of why analog audio is or isn't better than digital.
And a lot of angry people on the internet, I see.
And we have some very angry, very revealing community discussions from Reddit and YouTube about the skyrocketing costs of hobbies.
We've got everything from 18th century flower riots to $5,000 goth chickens, right?
We do. And we're going to see that these aren't separate trends. The bread, the records, the chickens, they're all part of the same phenomenon, the commodification of simplicity.
Yes, I want to start with the bread. Because that $75 basket my friend had, it really stuck with me. It just seems so completely unnecessary.
It is the perfect entry point. But to really understand why that basket costs $75 and why your friend feels the need to own it, we need to look at a narrative that popped up in our research. It provides a really stark contrast to your friend's kitchen.
I was scrolling through some archives recently, and I stumbled upon a narrative that really makes you question who owns our basic survival skills. Imagine a woman named Elena living in a cramped apartment in San Francisco. Her grandmother, who immigrated with nothing, used to bake bread using only flour, water, and the wild yeast in the air, a literal survival staple that cost pennies. When Elena tried to reconnect with this heritage, she found herself staring at a $500 automated sourdough fermentation chamber and $30 artisanal starters shipped in temperature-controlled vials. She saw online how this ancient biological technology, once the ultimate tool of self-sufficiency for the poor, has been rebranded as an elite laboratory experiment. Every time she looked at a pro-level Dutch oven priced at a month's groceries, she felt the gate closing. I've been thinking about Elena's story, and it feels like we are witnessing a quiet enclosure of the commons. By turning a basic human right, the ability to feed oneself from the environment, into a high-barrier luxury hobby, the system ensures we stay dependent on commercial supply chains. While I understand the desire for perfection in craft, we have to be careful when we let the price tag of a loaf of bread become a wall that separates us from our own ancestral intelligence. The transformation of sourdough from a survival staple into an elite luxury reflects a broader pattern of gatekeeping ancient biological technologies and ancestral self-sufficiency methods from the general population to maintain modern dependency. That story really frustrated me. Ancestral intelligence, that's a heavy term. It implies that by not knowing how to do this simply, we're actually less intelligent than the people who came before us. My friend with the Japanese steel knife. He wasn't using ancestral intelligence. He was using a credit card.
He was using purchasing power to simulate intelligence. And I think that we need to stop there for a second. You mentioned the Japanese steel knife. Why does that matter?
Because it just seems so over the top.
It matters because throughout history, the tool you used defined your class standing. We have a fascinating paper in the stack by Ken Albala titled Power Equals Power. He traces the history of milling technology, and it completely flips the script on how we view luxury bread.
Flipping the script, what's so complicated about grinding grain?
Well, let's go way back, prehistoric, Neolithic. Albala talks about the saddle quern. Have you ever seen one of these in a museum?
It's basically just a big rock with a dip in it, right? And a smaller rock you rub back and forth.
Correct. But think about the physics of that. The pure labor.
Yeah.
If you were in a Neolithic household, you owned one. You knelt over it on the ground. You used your own body weight, your own calories, your back muscle, your sweat to grind grain into flour.
So it's your own energy going into it.
Your own power.
Yeah.
The power to make food came from your own body. Every calorie you ate was a calorie you earned physically.
So extremely labor intensive, but you owned the means of production. There was no middleman.
No middleman. Literal physical power equaled the power to feed yourself. But as civilization advanced, we moved to water-powered mills. And we're not talking about some quaint little cottage. Imagine the Roman complex at Barbagal in southern France.
Okay.
This wasn't a quaint water wheel. This was 16 overshot wheels cascading down a steep hillside, driving massive millstones. It was an industrial factory in the 2nd century. It sounded like thunder. It churned out tons of flour.
Okay, so efficiency goes way, way up. That's good, isn't it? More bread for everyone.
Efficiency goes up, but autonomy goes down. Suddenly, you don't grind your own grain. You take it to the miller. You pay a fee. Production became centralized. It moved out of the home and into the hands of the wealthy elite or the state who could afford to build these massive machines.
So the power shifted from your muscles to the landlord's water wheel.
And this created a class divide that lasted for nearly 2,000 years. It defined everything. For most of history, white, finely milled flour was the ultimate status symbol.
White flour. The stuff we think of as the cheap stuff.
The absolute peak of luxury. Why? Because to get white flour, you had to grind it, and then you had to bolt it, sieve it through expensive silk or fine cloth to remove the bran and the germ.
Oh, so you're losing a lot of the actual grain.
You're wasting a lot of the grain, and it took immense labor and technology. Only the rich could afford to be that wasteful.
So the rich ate the fluffy white stuff because it was wasteful and expensive to produce.
Yes. And the poor. They ate the dark, coarse, whole grain bread, the stuff full of bran. In 1620, a writer named Tobias Venner actually wrote that whole grain bread was most fit for dogs.
For dogs? Wow.
It wasn't considered health food. It was considered filler for animals and peasants.
That is wild to think about, because now if I go to the store, the Wonder Bread, the whitest, fluffiest stuff, is the cheapest thing on the shelf. And the dark, dense, ancient grain loaf costs $8.
That is the modern reversal. In the 19th and 20th centuries, we perfected industrial milling. We invented high-speed steel rollers that could strip the bran off grain in milliseconds. We added bleaching agents. We added preservatives.
And suddenly white bread became cheap.
It became the cheapest, most abundant food source in human history. It was a technological triumph.
Right, I grew up on that stuff. Peanut butter and jelly on white bread. It lasts forever and costs nothing.
So consider the sociology of status. Once the perfect white loaf became cheap and accessible to the masses, it lost its value as a status marker. The wealthy needed a new way to signal distinction.
They couldn't eat white bread anymore.
Not if they wanted to feel special. The poor were eating it. So the status symbol flipped back to the archaic. Now, the labor-intensive, rough, inconsistent, dark, whole grain loaf is the symbol of wealth.
So we are paying a premium for the inefficiency of the process, for something that's harder to make and probably less consistent.
We are paying for time. Al-Bala argues that in the modern era, time is the scarcest resource. If you can afford to reject efficient industrial yeast that rises in 2 hours and instead nurture a finicky wild starter that takes 24 hours, requires feeding, requires a $400 temperature control box, and might fail anyway,
You're showing off.
you are signaling that you have time to waste. You are signaling that you're not bound by the efficiency of the industrial market.
That makes so much sense. My friend isn't just making bread, he's performing, having time. He's saying, look at me, I don't need to rush. But wait, there's another layer to this sourdough thing. It's not just about history, it's about who gets to claim this culture. We have this source, Fermentation for the Spirit, by Lauren Fournier and Greta Hamilton. They talk about the memification of sourdough.
Yes, and this is where the gatekeeping gets really uncomfortable. Fournier and Hamilton discuss how, during the pandemic, sourdough became this massive viral trend. Everyone was doing it. But with that popularity came a sort of trend chaser mentality.
You know, the type of person who treats a hobby like a fast fashion item. Yeah.
Like Fred Armisen in Portlandia saying sourdough is over or shell art is over.
That becomes a joke.
Right. And the authors critique this heavily. They argue that viewing fermented foods as just a bourgeois hobby or a hipster trend creates a false narrative. It erases the actual history of these foods.
Right, fermentation wasn't invented by guys in Brooklyn with waxed mustaches.
It was a survival staple for Chinese, Russian, Korean, Ethiopian, and Iranian families for centuries.
Yeah, the source mentioned that. Like, your grandmother didn't keep a sourdough starter because she was trying to be cool on Instagram. She did it because there was no grocery store or she couldn't afford commercial yeast. It was a necessity.
And when we encase this practice in $75 Banneton baskets in expensive workshops, we create a barrier. We make it seem like you need the gear to participate.
They're putting a price on entry.
Fournier calls out the slow food fallacy, the idea that slow is inherently better or more moral. But she points out that having the time to be slow is a massive privilege. If you are a single mom working 2 jobs, you buy the Wondy bread not because you lack taste, but because you lack time.
It's the difference between slow food because you have a trust fund and slow food because you can't afford the fast option.
Precisely. The source contrasts the $3,000 fermentation setup your friend has with community initiatives. Things like the Free Food Forest in Atlanta or Fermentation is Revolution workshops.
So what are those?
These are groups trying to reclaim the skill without the price tag. They're teaching people to ferment in old jam jars, not temperature-controlled chambers. But the dominant narrative, the one Elena faced in that story, is that if you aren't buying the expensive gear, you aren't doing it right.
So the barrier isn't the difficulty of the bread. Bread is literally flour and water. You can make it on a flat rock if you have to. The barrier is the performance of the difficulty.
It is about congealed power. That's the term Al-Bala uses. If you look at it through his lens, the person with the expensive setup is displaying their power over the production process. They aren't just baking, they are collecting baking technology. They are proving they can afford to complicate a simple process.
That collecting mindset, that brings us to our next topic. Because if you think bread is bad, wait until we look at music. I've got a few records, but I definitely don't have a dedicated listening room.
Well, prepare to feel inadequate. Because the world of vinyl has become a battlefield of gatekeeping that makes the sourdough bros look relaxed.
I heard a story about a young musician in London named Julian who spent months tracking down an original 1970s analog pressing of a jazz record. He wasn't looking for a status symbol, he was looking for a frequency. He'd read that digital streaming compresses the soul out of music, stripping away the authentic non-digital signatures that hold the cultural memory of the previous era. But when he finally found the record, it was locked behind a glass case in a high-end boutique, priced for a tech mogul's physical archive. I saw a video of him standing there, realizing that the very vibrations of history are being hyperinflated out of reach for the people who actually need that inspiration. It's as if there is a strategic barrier being built around our cultural past. When analog media becomes a plaything for the ultra-wealthy, the information reset becomes real. The rest of us are left with the sanitized, trackable, and erasable digital versions, while the authentic truth is hoarded in private vaults. As a creator, I find this trend deeply unsettling. While it's great that vinyl is back, we have to be careful when we ask, who gets to hear the original master? If the price of history is only affordable to the few, then the many are left living in a digital simulation where the past can be edited at any time. The hyperinflation of analog media like vinyl records functions as a strategic barrier to accessing authentic non-digital frequency signatures and physical archives of cultural memory that survived the previous era's information reset. That phrase, information reset, really creeps me out. It sounds like something from a dystopian novel, but I have to ask the skeptical question here.
Go for it.
Julian was looking for a frequency. He thinks the digital version has no soul. Is that real? Is analog actually better? Because I listen to Spotify, and it sounds fine to me. Am I missing something, or is this just nostalgia with a high price tag?
That is the million-dollar question, sometimes literally given the price of high-end audio gear. We have a technical breakdown here comparing analog and digital recording, and the science is, well, it's not on Julian's side. At least not in the way he thinks.
Okay, give me the specs. Destroy my dreams. I'm ready.
Okay. If you look at dynamic range, that is the difference between the quietest whisper and the loudest explosion a format can capture. Digital wins, hands down. A standard CD has a dynamic range of over 90 decibels. A high-res digital file can go even higher.
And vinyl? What's the number for that?
A pristine, brand-new vinyl record is physically limited to about 60 or 70 decibels. If you try to cut a groove deeper than that to make it louder, the needle will literally jump out of the track.
So digital just captures more of the sound? It's not even close?
Technically, yes. Digital is also cleaner. It doesn't have wow and flutter. That's the slight wobbling of pitch you get because a turntable motor isn't spinning at exactly 33 1/3 revolutions per minute.
Which they never are, really.
Right. And it doesn't have rumble, which is the low frequency noise of the bearings grinding against the platter.
But hold on, if digital is technically superior in every measurable way, why does everyone say vinyl sounds better? Why do audiophiles talk about warmth? Digital is cold, vinyl is warm. I've heard it myself. It does sound different. Are we all just collectively hallucinating?
You aren't hallucinating, but you might be misinterpreting the data. According to audio engineers, that warmth is actually distortion.
Distortion? I thought distortion was bad, like a blown speaker.
It can be. But in this case, it's called harmonic saturation. When a needle traces a groove, it can't do it perfectly. The friction, the inertia of the tone arm, the vibration of the vinyl itself, it adds frequencies that weren't in the original recording.
So the warmth is just noise? It's stuff that wasn't supposed to be there?
It's pleasing noise. Our ears happen to like that specific type of distortion. It sounds thick or rich to us, but it isn't accurate in the scientific sense. It's like adding a sepia filter to a photograph. It looks nice, it feels nostalgic, but it isn't what the camera actually saw.
But there's a darker side to this purity argument, isn't there? You mentioned a scandal involving a company called MoFi. This reads like a true crime story for nerds.
Oh, this is a massive story. So Modal Fidelity Sound Lab, or MoFi, is a legendary company. They produce these ultra-disc one-step pressings. They cost over $100 each, sometimes more.
For one record?
For one record. And for years, they marketed these records as the holy grail of analog. The promise was that they took the original master tape from, say, 1970, played it, and cut the lacquer directly from that tape. No computers, no digital steps, a pure analog signal chain.
That's what people were paying for, the purity, the frequency Julian was looking for.
Exactly. People built entire identities around hearing the difference. Golden-eared reviewers wrote essays about the air and the soundstage that could only come from that analog chain.
I can just picture them.
But then, in 2022, a guy from a record store in Phoenix started asking questions. Rumors started flying. And eventually, MoFi had to admit the truth.
Which was, don't leave me hanging.
For years, since about 2011, they had been secretly scanning the master tapes into a computer. They were creating high-resolution digital files and then cutting the records from the digital file.
No way. So the pure analog record was actually a recording of a digital file, the thing they were railing against.
Yes. And here is the kicker. Nobody noticed. For a decade, the snobbiest, most discerning audiophiles in the world listened to these records and praised their analog warmth. They couldn't tell.
That is hilarious. It's the emperor's new clothes, but for ears. It proves it's all in our heads.
It proves that a huge part of this hobby is psychological. It's about the idea of purity, not the sound itself. But, and this is a big but, even if the sound isn't magical, the archive aspect is real. And this brings us back to Julian's search.
Right, because even if the sound is the same, owning the object matters. It's about having the physical thing.
We have a source here from Nana Bon-Tilstrip called Cultural Memory in the Digital Age. She makes a crucial point about digital archives. She calls them archives in motion.
What does that mean, archives in motion?
It means digital stuff doesn't just sit there. It has to be constantly refreshed. Servers need power, file formats change, licensing agreements expire. If Spotify goes bankrupt, or if an artist gets canceled and pulled from the platform, that music vanishes. It's ephemeral.
It's like renting history. You never really own it.
It's exactly. But a record, Tilstrip calls it an indexical tie to the past. It is a physical trace. When you hear the huffing, coughing, laughing of a jazz musician on an old record, you are hearing a physical vibration that was etched into plastic and stayed there for 50 years. It doesn't require a server. It just requires a needle.
So when Julian was looking for that record, he wasn't just looking for better sound. He was looking for security. He wanted to own the memory so no one could take it away or change it.
Yes. And that is why the gatekeeping is so dangerous. We saw this in the YouTube rant source we analyzed. The narrator talks about how records that used to be in the $1 bin, the stuff you'd buy just to see what it sounded like, are now $50 at boutiques.
So the learner, the kid who just wants to explore jazz, can't afford the entry fee anymore.
Exactly. Cultural memory is becoming an asset class. The rich aren't just buying better sound, they're buying the master copy of history. They are putting our shared culture into private vaults.
And the community itself isn't helping. We looked at that Reddit thread from Ravenel. Gatekeepers be like, it was brutal.
It's really hostile. You have these newcomers who are excited. They buy a cheap turntable, a Crossley usually, suitcase ones, because they want to participate. And the elites descend on them.
That's a toy. You're ruining your records.
Why bother if you don't have a $2,000 setup?
It's so mean-spirited. Like, let the kid listen to the Beatles. Why does it matter if the needle is heavy?
Well, the argument is that the heavy needle damages the grooves, which is technically true over time. But the spirit of the criticism is about exclusion. It's about maintaining the boundary between the real audiophile and the consumer.
The Reddit OP argued that newcomers are good because they drive demand, right? Which means more cool stuff gets reissued for everyone.
But the counterpoint, which came up in the DIY music source, is that this independent spirit is being co-opted. The DIY ethos used to be about accessibility. Anyone can make music, anyone can listen. Now with platform capitalism, even being an indie collector is about maximizing value. You aren't just a listener, you're an investor.
Yeah, the YouTube rant mentioned people buying records just to hang them on the wall. They don't even own a turntable.
That is the ultimate commodification. The music, the utility is irrelevant. The record is just a signifier of cool. It's a prop.
It's like buying a Ferrari and keeping it in the garage under a tarp, which honestly sounds like something people do.
Yeah.
But this obsession with gear overdoing isn't just about music or bread. It's happening in the woods, too. I see this all the time now. The overlanders.
The great outdoors. The last bastion of simplicity, or so we thought. But if you go to a national park today, it could look like a military operation.
Try to imagine a man named David, a craftsman who grew up in the Pacific Northwest using simple, sturdy canvas and steel gear to navigate the wilderness. He recently took his son camping, hoping to teach him technical sovereignty, how to fix a tent with a needle or sharpen a knife on a stone. But when they arrived at the trailhead, they were surrounded by over-engineered overland rigs worth six figures and survival gear that looked more like aerospace technology than utility tools. David felt like an outsider in his own woods. He realized that the simple, old-world utility he valued had been commodified into a consumerist dependency. If your survival gear requires a proprietary lithium battery and a specialized repair kit that costs hundreds, are you actually surviving, or are you just a high-end consumer? I saw a comment from someone like David online, and it hit me hard. The more advanced our gear becomes, the less capable we are as individuals. From a professional perspective, I see the appeal of high-end engineering, but we must acknowledge the political reality here. By replacing simple repairable tools with expensive, hyper-complex gadgets, the market systematically removes our ability to be truly independent. We are being sold the aesthetic of ruggedness while being stripped of the actual skills and sovereignty that our ancestors took for granted. The commodification of high-end survival gear and traditional craftsmanship mirrors the systematic removal of technical sovereignty from the public domain by replacing simple old-world utility with expensive and over-engineered consumerist dependencies. Technical sovereignty, I love that term. It's the ability to be the master of your own environment, to fix your own stuff, to not be helpless.
And we are losing it. This brings us to the concept of de-skilling. We have a definition from the sociological literature here. Usually when economists talk about de-skilling, they mean automation replacing workers, like a robot replacing a factory worker, or ChatGPT replacing a copywriter.
Right, losing your job to a machine. We hear about that all the time.
But there's also personal de-skilling. This is what happens to the hobbyist or the individual. When you rely on technological aids, GPS, autopilots, smart tents that pitch themselves, you reduce your cognitive engagement with the task.
You stop thinking, you just push the button and trust the machine.
Exactly. There's a famous study cited in our research about pilots. It found that when pilots rely too much on autopilot, they lose the feel for flying. They lose the muscle memory of how the plane reacts to wind.
So when something goes wrong,
when the autopilot fails in a crisis, they panic. They don't know what to do. They've forgotten the basic skills.
And that's what's happening to the camper.
Imagine the camper in the $200,000 Sprinter van. You know, the ones lifted suspension, solar panels, induction cooktop, satellite Wi-Fi.
We see them everywhere.
If that battery system fails, does that person know how to build a fire? Does he know how to insulate a shelter? Probably not. He is camping, but he is insulated from the reality of nature by a layer of technology. He is a pilot on autopilot.
It's funny you mentioned the Sprinter vans. The YouTube rant we watched went off on these. It's basically a luxury apartment on wheels. Are you really getting away from it all if you have an espresso machine and are checking your email?
You are engaging in the aesthetic of camping. You look rugged, the van looks rugged, but you are completely dependent on the grid, on the supply chain, on the specialized mechanic who can fix the van's computer. You have traded sovereignty for comfort, but you paid a premium to pretend it's still dangerous.
And this connects to a bigger idea.
Right, this connects directly to Neil Postman's concept of technopoly.
I remember reading Postman in college, amusing ourselves to death, but I haven't read Technopoly. What's his take here?
So Postman distinguishes between three types of cultures. First, you have tool-using cultures. In these societies, tools are just there to solve physical problems. You have a spear to kill a deer. You have a pot to cook it. The tool serves the human.
Gibble. The tool is a servant. It does a job.
Then you have technocracy, where technology starts to attack the culture, challenging its values. But technopoly is the final stage. This is where the culture deifies technology. The culture takes its orders from technology.
We serve the tools instead of the other way around.
Yes. Postman argues that technopoly values efficiency, precision, and objectivity above all else. It eliminates other ways of knowing. Think about the coffee example from the YouTube rant.
Oh, the coffee snobs, the people who weigh their beans to the decimal point and time their pour with a stopwatch.
Exactly. Why do we do that? Why do we eat a $500 grinder to get the perfect particle size? Is it because we trust our taste buds? No. It's because we don't trust them. We trust the machine. We believe that if we can measure it, if the scale says 18.5 grams, it must be better.
We've submitted to the authority of the machine's precision.
We have. We've turned breakfast into a science experiment because we're afraid of making a bad cup of coffee, whatever that means.
And in doing so, we lose the purpose.
Postman says in a technopoly, information appears indiscriminately. We have more data about our bike ride cadence, heart rate, wattage, GPS coordinates than we know what to do with.
That brings up the cycling example. The YouTube source mentions cyclists buying $14,500 bikes. And that's without pedals. The pedals are extra.
It's the absurdity index. When you look at the examples from that rant, it perfectly illustrates Postman's point. The technology and the money overtake the culture.
Let's run through a few of those because they are hilarious and depressing at the same time. The chicken one blew my mind.
The I am Samani, the Lamborghini of poultry.
The goth chicken.
Yes. Historically, a chicken is a chaotic bird that eats bugs and gives you eggs. It is the ultimate low-tech livestock.
A poor man's grocery store. It just wanders around and makes food.
Right. But in a technopoly, even nature must be commodified and optimized. So we have the Ayam Samani. It's a breed from Indonesia. It has a dominant gene that causes hyperpigmentation. Everything is black.
Everything.
The feathers, the beak, the meat, even the bones.
And how much does this bird cost?
A breeding pair can cost $5,000. And because they're so expensive, people build $100,000 coops with security cameras and climate control to protect them.
$5,000 for a chicken. That's not farming, that's art collecting with live animals.
That is status signaling.
Yeah.
You are taking a basic animal and turning it into a luxury good. Or look at bourbon. It used to be a working class drink. Corn whiskey. Yeah. Now, it's a liquid stock market.
Oh, I have friends who do this. They hunt for bottles of Blanton's or Pappy Van Winkle. They stand in line for hours.
And do they drink it?
No. They have what they call bunkers. Closets full of whiskey they will never open. They trade them online or just look at them.
Exactly. The utility, the getting drunk, the enjoying a sip with friends is gone. The bottle is just an asset. Or the video games. A sealed copy of Super Mario 64 sold for $1.5 million.
That one hurts my heart. Mario is meant to be played. He's meant to jump on Goombas. Locking him in a plastic case. It's like putting a bird in a box. It kills the soul of the thing.
At that point, it isn't a game. It isn't a tool for play. It is an investment asset. It has been completely removed from its original purpose.
So what does this all mean? We started with bread, went through vinyl, camped in a $200,000 van, and ended up with $1 million video games. It feels like we are spiraling.
I think if we connect the dots, we see three distinct stories of loss here. These aren't just random anecdotes.
Okay, break it down. What are the three stories?
Story number one, sourdough. We are losing access to biological and ancestral skills. We are being told that to feed ourselves, we need elite equipment, which keeps us dependent on the system.
Right, gatekeeping survival. That's what it is.
Story number two, vinyl. We are being priced out of our own cultural memory. The real history is being locked in vaults, leaving us with the ephemeral, rentable, digital version.
Gatekeeping history.
And story number three, the survival gear. We are trading our sovereignty, our knack for fixing things and surviving, for expensive, shiny tools that actually make us less capable. We are outsourcing our competence to the machine.
It really feels like the simple life isn't simple anymore. It's been hijacked. My friend with the $3,000 bread oven, he thinks he's opting out of the system, but he's actually just buying into a different, more expensive part of it. He's not a baker. He's a collector of baking technology.
And I think the antidote, if there is one, comes back to what Bala and Fournier were hinting at. The act of resistance isn't buying the right expensive heritage flour. It isn't buying the right analog gear.
What is it then?
It's doing it badly. It's making a messy, imperfect loaf with whatever flour you can afford. It's listening to a scratched record on a cheap turntable and just dancing to the music. It's sleeping in a cheap tent and actually feeling the ground.
It's refusing to perform.
It's refusing to let the performance of the hobby replace the joy of it. It's about utility over status.
That is actually really liberating. I don't need the Japanese steel knife. I just need to make the bread. If we continue to outsource our skills to machines and our cultural history to high-end collectors, we risk becoming tourists in our own lives, visiting the concept of living without ever actually getting our hands dirty. The question is, are you owning your tools or are your tools owning you?